I'm a mess, y'all. Whew. So good morning to everyone, especially those of you who are going to be watching this on YouTube. Just want to let y'all know again that I'm number one on social justice. It's not a struggle. Probably I'm the only one on social justice. Hello, Lygians. What? Good morning. I hope you're well this morning. How are you? Just getting things started. Got myself today. I just have a little bottle of water. Good morning, Tom Hall. I'm keeping it easy. I can't actually say that I didn't have a pretty big breakfast today. Um, and after this, a big breakfast this morning, and I'm probably going to head to the gym after this live stream, which I'm gonna take it easy today. So we'll see how the conversation goes. If things are flowing, we might stay on a little bit longer than the hour. I'm just in a very mood today. So like James, I used to teach in public schools in Philly. So just so you know, I have some. I'm from Philly. Well, I lived in Philly for a very long time, so I can say, I guess I can say I'm from Philly, but I lived in Philly for a very long time. Are you still in Philly? Not that I'm going to come and stalk you, and don't give us so much information that other people can come and stalk you. But are you still in Philly, or are you somewhere else? While you're answering that, I was in okay. All right, so yeah, so if you're in Bangkok, you're probably very, very far. You're not teaching in Philly, unless you're teaching remotely from Philly, and I'm not sure exactly how that would work. Some of you are not showing up in the chat yet, so I haven't said good morning to you. Ananda, good morning. Uh, so yeah, there's a little handful of people who are in the show, not showing up in the chat yet. So good morning to all of you. So as I was saying, I'm taking it a little bit easy this today. It was a long night last night. Last night, so you guys know about Dropsy, and I've done several videos about Dropsy and like getting ready and all that stuff. So Hope and Anchor, where Dropsy was a regular hostess and was the primary hostess for about 10 years. About 10 years. That restaurant is closing today. They're actually going to have a they're going to have a New Orleans style ceremony today as they shut the doors of Hope and Anchor for good. So last night was yeah. So last night was the very last night of Hope and Anchor karaoke, at least at that location, and Dropsy was in full force. And then Dropsy had to kind of chill out, and so we took a little break, and then they came out, and we ended up staying until 4 o'clock in the morning. So it was a really long night, but I feel good. So I don't want you to think that I'm dragging or that I don't want to be here or that I'm not 100% excited to be with all of you. Especially early announcement next week, I will not be live streaming. And that is because next week we are holding auditions. Next Sunday we are holding auditions for Black Conference. So if you're in New York City and you're an actor and you're interested, you can go to Red Hook Theater, RedHookTheater.org, and look up information for how you can audition for Black Conference. I'm going to tell you guys, I'm going to tell you now. We had a lot of submissions, and the books are full. But depending on what you have on your resume and what you have on your video, there's a chance I might squeeze some people in. But I'm very excited about that. So that to me, that's kind of kicking off the official production calendar for the Black Conference, although the project has been in planning for quite some time, and there's been quite a bit of organizing in the cooperative network in New York City to make sure all the co-ops know about it and that this is being developed as a tool to raise awareness of co-ops, and even having co-ops not just come out, but having co-ops have a moment where they can be sort of shouting out, because it is interactive, and so will be the audience will talk back. The audience will have a chance to talk back instead of having a talk back at the end of the play and having the audience speak to the actors. The audience gets to speak directly to the characters and ask them questions and, kind of interrogate them. And so I think that that's one of the most exciting parts of this play for me, is that there's a whole act of the play where the characters have to defend what they've been saying throughout the play. And so that's one of the challenges of directing and researching this play, is all the characters have to know their subject area well enough to be able to defend it extemporaneously, improvisationally. So yeah, so I hope people will come out. If you're in, again, if you're in the New York area, that you're going to come out over the Labor Day weekend, May 24th through May 28th, and check out Black Conference. You can actually, again, you can visit the Red Hook Theater website and get information on getting tickets. Tickets are on sale now. In fact, for Black History Month, tickets are available at discount. So yeah, so all that stuff is happening. All that is happening. And hopefully by now everybody has had a chance to pour themselves, as Yvette Carnell says, pour your libation, and settle in for a conversation about these guns. What's up with these guns? And a solution that has been floated for how to deal with school gun violence is, when do I really rest, Ananda? When do I rest? This is my rest. This is what this is what gives me energy. Like conversations like this is restful. Writing, working on a piece, directing a play, all of those things, those give me so much energy, and I'm sure that they take energy too. I sleep. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I go to bed at 10 o'clock at night. If I could go to bed at 9:30, I go to bed at 9:30 at night. So I get lots of sleep. So that's one thing that I do for myself. And I try to, while I'm working, maintain a sense of peace and ease about myself, not to let things stress me out. I mean, if something presents itself as a challenge, I like to see that as more like a puzzle, like a Rubik's Cube. And so I try to make that a fun and growth and opportunity moment, as opposed to like oh my goodness, things are falling apart. And I kind of tend to be that way even when things are falling apart. People were kind of creeped out by me during 9/11, because while a lot of people were, I mean, it was an upsetting occasion, but I was constantly thinking, okay, like, how do we, if this is happening, what do we need to do? How would we be able to get across the bridge? How would we be able to make sure that we could be connected? Like I was in that moment, I was like problem solving. And so where other people were kind of like spinning out of control, I was very calm. And a friend of mine told me some years later that they thought I was having a nervous breakdown, that they saw my calm as shock, but it wasn't. So a long answer, Ananda, to your question about when do I rest. I try to be at rest. I try to incorporate rest into everything that I do. So again, and of course this conversation is sparked most recently by the incident in South Florida, where in a South Florida high school there were 17 people killed, and there was a 19-year-old suspect, and there were questions about whether or not that person, there were clues that could have helped them avoid the situation, but all of that, one of the ideas that's been floated and one of the issues or questions being, I guess, debated right now is whether or not teachers should be armed. If that's not an answer to school violence, is to introduce more guns, And it kind of reminds me of the way that people think about the education system anyway. It's like if the education system is doing poorly, if we have a poorly functioning education system, uh, the answer is to just throw more money at it, and n- not questioning whether or not the way that we are structure of the school system itself might not need to be um, criticized, analyzed, and criticized. So Leitching says both teachers unions have come out against the idea. Yeah, my husband, who used to be a teacher, said and forgive me, it's going to go a little bit R-rated right now. My husband said that the answer to should teachers be given guns in schools is, are you out of your fucking mind? And I kind of want to read his Facebook response. I'm nervous about leaving all of you, but hold on, let me try to get to his page and read what he wrote because I thought it was actually pretty on point, and it also speaks, I think, to the way that we address um, things that are just shouldn't be up for debate, like people's human rights shouldn't be up for debate, right? People's lives shouldn't be up to debate for debate. As vegans, we might think that the lives of animals or the consideration of animals as food or commodities should not be up for debate. They're living things, and if you are engaging in a particular type of activity, it shouldn't be a question of whether you're doing is not violence, right? And so my husband says the correct response should be to should we arm teachers or are you out of your fucking mind? And then he went on, and I'm trying to find what he went on to write, but basically it was that we shouldn't, this shouldn't be a question. It shouldn't be a question of debate. It should be a question of ridicule. It should be a subject of ridicule, not a subject for debate, a subject of ridicule. And I like this idea. So it sort of takes away this idea that people should be allowed to ask the question, but we shouldn't feel compelled to respond to the question as if it were a reasonable question, right? Like if someone says, "Hey, can I punch you in the face?" That shouldn't be, there should be, I should not give anyone the impression, if someone comes up to me and says, "Can I punch you in the face?" I shouldn't give them the impression that that is up for discussion, right? Not everything isn't up for discussion. And so this idea of giving teachers guns, okay, it's maybe seems like more of a gray area, but when you already have in schools, you already have security, right? And the security isn't making a difference. So do you think by giving like teachers who, what, so now we're going to have teachers take time out of learning how to be good teachers to learn how to be better security guards? That is a ridiculous notion, right? But I'd like to know what other people think, right? I'd like to know what other people think. Um, and the question is not, obviously, I put down that the topic was, should teachers have a gun? But the topic isn't. That's not the topic for today. That's not the topic for today. So Tom Hall says both parents and students have come out against it. So I guess that's what we'll do. Oh my goodness. So yes, and since people don't like the idea, then it definitely should be done, right? Teachers with guns not an option. But here's the thing: it's not. Like I said before, it was. Sorry for the clickbait, but the topic really isn't about whether or not teachers should be given guns, right? The topic is what is the question isn't. I don't think the question is, are guns dangerous? I don't think that's the question. I don't think the question is, are there too many guns? I don't think the question is, who should be allowed to have them? It seems to me that the question is, what is happening culturally that we have become a society where violence is so normal, where it's such a part of our everyday lives? I mean, extreme violence. is part of our everyday lives. And so we can talk about, I don't want to take away from 17 people being killed. It's not 17 people being killed. Let's get into it, right? That's 17 individuals, each one of them having the same, not desires, but a desire to be in the same way each of us might have a desire to be, right? And think about your own life and think about all the connections and all of the people who are responsible to you and the people that you are responsible for, right? The people who would be devastated if you were gone, the things that would fall apart if you weren't here, right? The things that would fall apart if you weren't here. And now compound that by 17, right? So when we think about, not just the of loss, right? There's the whole unraveling of worlds that are the results of each one of those people being taken away, having their lives taken away, right? All that won't happen, that can't happen, that has to be, everything that had to be stopped short, right? And the violence that continues as a result of that one act of violence, right? So let's try to think of it this way, right? And then look at the kind of violence that we see happening on a day-to-day basis that we don't even think about as violence, or that maybe the average person doesn't think about as violence, right? And each one of those acts is having that same effect over and over and over again. Ananda says, and more in the hospital fighting for their lives, right? So that one individual act, but if that kind of event has become an everyday, it's become an everyday occurrence for us. Why have we become such a violent place when, rhetorically speaking, one of the values that we uphold as a society is nonviolence? And if we look at even I'm sure that, and you tell me, because I would love for people to come on, and I'm going to throw some things out there that may be really controversial, and I'm hoping that some of you will jump on and talk about this with me. But do you mean to tell me that school wasn't a violent place already before anybody was attacked by a gun? Do you think that school was a peaceful place, and that the people who came into that space feeling safe, feeling that their humanity was being fully embraced? Or do you believe that in that school, and in probably most schools in the United States, and I don't know what schools are like in the rest of the world, but that there aren't acts of violence that occur in the lives of students in a school environment every day? That there aren't acts of violence that occur in workplace environments every day? But there's so much, like, everybody wants to talk about, oh, nonviolence. No, we can't have. But there's violence. There is violence. Everywhere we turn, there is violence. And that horrible act, and I'm not going to say that it was justified, but that horrible act was the response to violence that was being visited, not necessarily on that person, but that person saw being visited on the people around them every day, that gave them the license to take it to the next level. There is a very different tense feeling in the US that is absent in many other countries. I wonder if that does it. And Nanda says, things never happen in a vacuum. And then Lai Chien says, I've also taught in Thailand and China, and there are not lockdown drills there. There's a very different tense feeling in the US that is absent in many other countries. And so then we have to talk about, is it an issue of the US? And my understanding at this point, and I haven't looked at numbers lately. I'm sorry, my numbers are based on things from, maybe 2 years ago, but the level of gun violence in the United States and the level of violence generally in the society in the US is far higher than in other at least Western countries, right? But that's just what's happening within the borders of the US. What are the acts of violence that we are modeling throughout? And so that 17 people that I was talking about earlier, and the fact that that happens in the world um, um, as the administration of violence in other parts of the world, every day, and we see it. We see the pictures of the bombs going off and the things, and we don't see the bodies, and we don't necessarily hear them talking about the bodies. And that's even if like you dig. That's even if you're watching the Democracy Now! And digging and like trying to check through, like looking at Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International, right? You're not seeing it. You're hearing about numbers, but you're not seeing it in the way that we see it when we see everybody running out of the school building of the high school when there's an event like that. So what is that about? And why do we accept that? Vegan sister, welcome and good morning. So we were talking about and Tom Hall said, and I think that about the alienated and think nothing would change if they disappeared. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what you mean. I'm not sure if you meant, if Tom. I'm not sure if you mean the guns or exactly what. But again, I am really really eager to have. It's been so long since I've had a guest. I don't want to say it's been so long since I've had a guest, but I think it's been so long since we've had those regular like people coming on and guesting. And I don't know, maybe you guys just like to hear me like run my mouth or what have you. But I really do like to have you talk back. Vegan sister, good morning. Yes, and welcome. So we've been talking about, this the teaser was that we were going to talk about should teachers have guns, but then the real conversation is like how has violence become so normal in the US? So a lot of people have been talking to me about Black Panther. I haven't seen Black Panther yet, but like think about it, right? Is it the number one movie in the country right now? It might be the number one movie in the world. I don't know. That's It's all about violence. It's all about violence. And I'm not saying that it's the movies that are making us. I don't think it's not the movies that are making us violent. I don't think so. I think the violence in movies is just a reflection of the appetite that we've developed in this country for violence. Where do we get that appetite, right? How did we become addicted to the drug of violence? So that's a question. So those of you who are, watching on YouTube, I hope you'll take a moment to leave some comments, some your thoughts on that. Vegan Sisters, as a factor in why violence has become normal is due to NRA propaganda. I'm going to say this. I'm going to push back. I'm going to push back. Why is the NRA? How has the NRA become so powerful? Right? If not for the fact that weapons manufacturers are rolling in it because they're supplying weapons to the violence that is being administered all around the world. Ananda says white fear. I'm like, if possibly But I don't know. I don't want to reduce it. I don't want to necessarily reduce it to race, because I feel as citizens of the United States that we all carry this culpability at this point, because the violence that is happening all over the world, right? And the violence that happens within the US borders pales in comparison to the violence that has been done outside of US borders, right? Right? You want to talk about the real weapons? These little guns that they were talking, these little guns and these little automatic weapons that people are trying to have in the US, they ain't nothing compared to the weapons that are being used by the military, right? And these are the same companies that are supplying these weapons, right? That's a lot of weapons. We're talking about, what is it now? The $600 billion is the last number that they talked about in terms of the U.S. budget. And where do you think most of that money is going? Not to pay soldiers. Not to pay soldiers. Support our troops, please. They ain't making no money. They ain't getting rich. Ain't no soldiers out there getting rich, right? The soldiers aren't out there getting rich. But they're probably carrying a weapon that's, the worth, worth more than they probably get paid in a year, right? You know what I'm saying? In terms of the the money that the money that the government pays, the amount of money that the government pays for these weapons, right? The contracts that the government has with these manufacturers, right? What you pay to go and buy a handgun, the government doesn't pay that price. That's not the government's price. And you would think that the government, with the amount of weapons that they pay, that they buy, would be getting a discount. But I don't think the government is trying to get a discount, right? So, um, fear is profitable. I do think that fear is a driving force, but I don't think fear is a driving force in the violence itself, because I don't think that violence is motivated by fear. I think violence is motivated by the quest for power and the desire to oppress, right? The desire to maintain control, to domination, right, and conquest, right, which is an age old, which is age old, right? Um, but because conquest has been our mode as a society, does that mean that it needs to continue to be our mode as a society? Why do we need to conquer people? What do we need that's so important that we need to continue conquering people? That we need to continue oppressing people? And fear is the rhetoric behind it. Fear is the rhetoric that likely keeps most of us silent. And okay, all right, I guess you need to do that because the terrorist will come and get me, right? Okay, oh, you need to do that because otherwise the black people will come and get me. You need to do that, otherwise the Mexicans will come and get me, right? So fear, I think, is what keeps the people from rising up against the elites and saying, stop this. This is ridiculous. Need, we don't need the oil. We don't need the oil, right? We don't need to be cutting down we don't need to, that much land so that we can raise this cattle, right? We don't need that. We don't need to continue being the dominators of the world. And I think that that's where the violence springs from. The violence is the mechanism of world domination. And that probably sounds so whack because we don't think about the fact that we're at war constantly as domination because it's been normalized. Because war is just it's just this thing that happens in the background. It's like the television, right? It's like the buzz of the refrigerator behind me right now. That's what war is, speaking culturally in the United States. It's the buzz of the refrigerator in the background, and it means, nothing. It means nothing. Um, Tom Hall, I think about the shareholders. These people need those sales to feed their children. People need those sales to feed, and I need to be more specific. Which people? These people. I always get confused when we talk about them and us because I'm like, when you say these people, are you talking about we people? Because my sense is we might be included in those numbers, or at least some of us in this room, I might be included in those numbers. Shareholders are not selling guns to feed their kids. It's about power and getting rich, right? So we're talking about maybe the shareholders in the families of the gun manufacturers. Again, like what? What is it that is needed? What is essential? And is that particular strategy for achieving security the only strategy? Do we need to have domination, or might we be able to organize ourselves as a society in a different way that we wouldn't need to be dominating each other, right? Is there a way that we might, we go back, we all just kind of went through pedagogy of the oppressed together, right? And we talk about the dialogical modes and the anti-dialogical modes. We talk about the ways that we come together cooperatively to liberate ourselves, and there are ways that we are either dominating others or being dominated, right? So we're dominating others or being dominated, right? And that is a strategy for achieving security, right? Domination is a strategy for achieving security, but it's not the only way. But it's the way that we keep choosing, and it's the way that I think most of us kind of rub our chins and say, this is having a really, really negative effect on the planet. Hmm. You want to talk about global warming? What do you think this constant bombing is doing to the atmosphere? If we're nervous about driving our cars, what do you think setting bombs constantly all over the world is doing to the environment, to the ecosystem? Light bombs are great products, still used and expensive. Yeah. I think that's one of the reasons why one of the first military actions Donald Trump was engaged in was like going and dropping bombs on an empty airport in Syria. That was somebody's huge payday, right? Mm. Gun manufacturers. Thank you, Tom, for clarifying that. I think I figured it out. I have trouble sometimes following the train because I'm trying to like talk and read and do these things. So forgive me if I lose. It's not that you all aren't communicating well. It's that it's all going by, so I'm not seeing it all. So I have to kind of scroll back but yeah, the jets that carry some of them are probably worse, right? So yeah, so we just think about like the activities of war in general, right? Tom says I'm chewing gum too. Um, some of you will get that. I don't know. So yeah, so that's what's been on my mind this week, and I teach a course in theater of the oppressed, and one of the things that I've been doing with the class is just looking at images, and of course the students were, and one of the things we do is we talk about the things that are happening and try to analyze those things, and we try to use images to analyze those things. And so one of the things that came up in the class last week was the shooting, obviously, and the fact that we're so quick to organize around these guns as if the guns are the problem. And I don't mean like, obviously, if there weren't guns, the kinds of violence that could be done wouldn't be done, right? Um, but it doesn't mean that violence wouldn't happen, right? Uh, we don't question, like, it's like suddenly when there's a school shooting, suddenly we imagine, and come on now, everybody think about their high school experience. And even if you weren't the target of that day-to-day violence and harassment that occurs routinely in schools, and don't for one second think that this is like they deserved it. That's not it. Because those students didn't create that environment either, right? Those students did not create the repressive environment that is high school. The teachers didn't create the repressive environment that is high school, right? Right? This is a structure that was created to harvest certain skills from the people to make them part of a labor force, right? So we are extracting labor. We want to be able to extract labor from those kids when they become adults, right? And we want to separate the ones that are going to be good little worker bees from the ones who might question or rebel. And the ones who might question or rebel, we're either going to send them to the military and whip them into shape, or we're going to put them in jail, or we're going to label them as mentally unfit, right? Let's be real. That school was not a safe space before somebody walked into it with a gun. It was not a safe space. But, that's not questioned. That's not questioned. And the kind of repressiveness that's happening within that school is happening on a much, much larger scale all over the world through the violence that's administered, right? Right? So, whew. All right, let me see what's happening here. The hierarchy does not treat many with dignity in school. No. Nope. Students are commodities. Students are, our budgets are, we get a bigger budget or less of a budget if we can get our students to perform the way they want them to perform, right? Growth and the demands of capital are the engine driving gun proliferation, right? And Tom, I want to say that's like you're hitting the nail on the head, but on the level not just of the guns, right? On the level not just of the guns, because some of that growth is growth that is necessary because we need to bomb Syria back into the Stone Age so that the contractors can get those jobs rebuilding them, right? So think about it. Every time we destroy something, every time the US goes and destroys something, US contractors are going to get the jobs of rebuilding them, right? Because we're going to go and we're going to occupy that place and we're going to call ourselves, building it back up and strengthening democracy in the world, right? That's what we're going to call it. But we're really paying these huge contractors, right, to go and rebuild them. That's not an accident, right? There's dollar signs attached not only to the guns, but to the destruction that the guns that happens because of the guns, that due to the guns, right? Henry Ford developed a lot of the way today's schools are structured. And I think you're talking about Lychines. I think you're talking about the assembly line, right? Right. And I think, I think there's, and I'll share it with you next week. But it's Ken. I think it's Ken. Maybe it's Ken Anderson. I can't think of his name right now, but it is a kind of a person who has done several TED Talks talking about education. I think if you type in Ken TED Talk education, you'll find it. But talks about the way that we're still teaching according to like the industrial model, but we live in the age of, we live in a very different age, right? We don't live in an age where people go, like most people are earning their living in manufacturing. Although most people who tend to be uneducated, people who have been pushed out of the education system, that's where people who only have a high school diploma can still go and earn a living wage. But those jobs are going away very quickly, right? And people want to, like talk about, I'm gonna take these out because nobody's talking to me. But people might want to complain about the idea of manufacturing and the way it nobody wants manufacturing around where they live, right? But that's where a lot of people who haven't been able to get more than a high school diploma, that's when they can actually earn a decent living and raise a family, right? But for the most part, yeah, we're not an industrial society, so why are we still educating people according to this like cookie cutter industrial model, right? And we don't have to do it. We don't have to do it. Somebody said, looks like Reg reset. I don't know what happened. Oh, I don't know what was saying. So, Light Jin says, looks like Reg reset. Ananda says, you're on fire, Reg. Say that. I am so passionate about this. I'm so passionate about this because I feel like I could say it till I'm blue in the face, but until everybody stands up and says, wait, hold, stop. This has to happen differently, right? Because we know it's so obvious to us that there's a different way we could be doing this, right? There's a different way that we can that right we could have you know we could have clean and renewable energy, right? In a world of clean and renewable energy, we don't have nearly as much of this, right? The scenarios that require this type of violence are not they start to vanish, right? They start to be diminished. But in Michigan, there's $1 million fossil fuel power plant being planned. In Michigan, there are regulations about the amount. I'm on the board of an organization called Solidarity, and the mission of Solidarity is like 100% renewable, clean and renewable energy for all people, right? That's the mission of the organization. Our first hurdle is that DTE, which is the energy company, which controls everything, has gotten the legislators to make a policy that no more than 1% of the energy consumers can be clean and renewable energy. And they say it's because of the way it's going to react with our equipment and this, that, and the other thing. Lies. But someone allowed that, right? And we sit by and we allow them to say, oh, okay, I guess 1%, only 1% of us can have solar panels on our house, right? Which means that once 1% of people have solar panels on their house, you can't get a permit from the city to put the panels on your house, and you have to apply for a permit to put the panels on your house. You can't get that permit. And here's another thing, is that they've actually added something to the policy that if you have the permit to put solar panels on your house and you sell your house, the buyer of your house has to get a new permit, which means they are moved to the end of the line, which means that the next person who was in line to be able to get solar panels then can get their solar panels, and your house with solar panels on it can't be running clean and renewable energy. This is what I'm talking about, right? And so to maintain the reason that those laws can be passed and those policies can be made is because they're backed by violence, right? The violence that's occurring that gives the gun manufacturers and gives all of the various stakeholders the wealth that they need to control the mechanisms that control society. So yeah, the gun is just, it's the beginning and the end, right? It's not the gun in the school that's the problem. It's the gun of the state that's the problem. So do we ask the state, do we try to control the state's guns? Right? Should we be trying to control guns in schools or arm more teachers? Or should we as a society be questioning the state's use of weapons and the administration of violence? Right? So yeah, I wore myself out a little bit. Tom says, call them crazy or worse Cassandras. Portal projects, what is social justice? Look it up. That's if bingo toe expenses paid weeks in the Bahamas. I'm not sure what that means, Tom Hall. Lychenes, much of society in the US sees everyone and everything as a commodity. It creates a lot of alienation. Yeah. There's a great book called Affluenza by Oliver James. Affluenza, y'all. So, Affluenza by Oliver James, Lychene's recommending about people seeing themselves as brands. Oh, yes. And I don't know if people know of a privileged vegan, but a privileged vegan about 6 months ago, or maybe it was a year ago now, time is just flying, made a video about this idea of, you know, us branding ourselves. I think I want to read that book. It's so funny. I have so much to read, and I have so much research to do, but I'm always interested in these ways that we can reframe the way of thinking and the way that we understand how the violence that's being done against us on a day-to-day basis, right? How we're being turned. Dehumanization is violence. Dehuman Dehumanization is violence. Is turning a living thing into a dead thing, right? When we turn people into commodities, when we turn animals into commodities, when we turn nature into commodities, we're turning living things into dead things. And Paulo Freire calls it necrophilia, like an obsession. Um, Tom Hall says, where did they get the money to do that? You mean the powers that be to get the Michigan legislators to make that policy that you can own that only 1% of the people. And I can and I'll look at I actually have the materials because Solidarity had a group go and do take the policy, pull the policy apart, and then give a report on it. So maybe next week I'll talk about, energy and the way that the state is blocking the proliferation of clean and renewable energy to maintain the proliferation of violence. Um, Ananda says the militarization of the police department is on the state, right? Yeah, the police. I mean, like, definitely, definitely. And it's so interesting. I don't know. I mean, this is. I feel like I'm like talking to dinosaurs when I talk about but Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow talks specifically about the way that the military, like, because the military always has to be getting new stuff, right? Because we want to keep up, right? Keep up with who? We have the strongest military in the world. Who do we? We're not keeping up. We're not in competition with anyone right now. We're not in competition. Where our military is the strongest force on the planet. We're not in competition with anyone. So why the military needs to keep up with anyone right now is beyond me. And since we've automated destruction and drones can go and do all the work, I don't even need to know why they keep talking about the troops and training soldiers and stuff like that. But honestly, they probably don't even need the bodies. And as soon as they don't need the bodies, trust me, they won't need the bodies. And there's going to be a lot of unemployed people who used to be able to go into the military and become, to help become the arm of the state, right? But Michelle Alexander talks about the military, then the old equipment has to go somewhere. And so they were incentivizing certain types of behavior, certain activities of police departments around the country. And your reward for maintaining your anti-drug programs or whatever it was that was helping keep, brown people behind bars, uh, your reward was that you would get a tank or you would get an Apache helicopter, right? So that's out of control. That's out of control. This got me heated, y'all. And I feel so upsetting because my students get so, like, they get so energized, like they can't wait to go to the march and march for gun control, right? And the gun control, they're marching for the wrong gun control. They're marching for the wrong gun control. They think it's about being safe in an environment that wasn't safe to begin with. Right? And I hope none of them are watching this not because I don't want them to know this, because I would love it. That nothing would make me happier than for a group of students in one of my classes that are about anti-oppression to look around the room and say, wait a minute, this is an oppressive and dehumanizing situation. This is an oppressive and dehumanizing situation. This class on anti-oppression is an oppressive, exploitative, dehumanizing situation where we are being asked to sit in this room to take a class that may or may not benefit us at all because someone has decided that it looks good for the university to have a particular type of course, right? And I'm not saying that it's not like the heart of the person who came up with the program that I teach as part of is what was in the right place. Yeah, they're doing the right thing and they're doing their bit for society, but it's within an institution that is part of ultimately an exploitative and oppressive system, right? So I don't know. Um, Tom Hall says General to Gitson, I'm not sure who that is, says we have to close the. Do you have a typo in there, Tom Hall? Check what you wrote to me and make sure that that's correct because I'm not sure. It says Minshat gap, and I'm not sure what that is. The Minshat gap? That probably is something, and I just don't know what it is. But please explain. Go further. And Tom, again, if you would like to jump on and guest and talk about this, we have, some more time. Um, the kids in the most underperforming schools that make it often have to go into the military to be able to afford to pay for college. Is that what you're saying, Lychians? Is that what you're referring to? Um, yeah, and not just and now and here's what's and this is part of living in a community where I see people who are middle class, right? Who send their kids to great schools, but they don't have the money to send their kids to college. And the military becomes an option, right? Kids that are, very bright, but maybe just not bright enough to get a scholarship, right? But very bright. They do everything right. They get good grades, but they can't afford to go to college. And so their options are go into the military or just not get a college degree, which means, basically you have a strike against you in terms of the job market. Tom Hall was a reference to Dr. Strangelove, which I need to go and watch, right? It's been years since or how I learned to love the bomb, right? Is it or how I learned to stop something and love the bomb? I'm not sure. What is this? What is the subtitle of Doctor Strangelove? Um, right. Even joining the military is seen as a step up from their neighborhoods. Lychins, and I'm telling you, where I lived in Red Hook, right? I'm talking about people who were living a very, I'm gonna say, modest, not living in palatial homes, but for New York standards, living in, quite comfortable homes. And this is across the spectrum. This is, the person that I happen to have in mind happens to come from a family that would be considered white. And their son is like, trying to like asking me to talk to somebody about getting them a recommendation so that they can get some kind of a position, so they can oh my goodness, so that they can go to like officer training school, right? And that's a different type of privilege, right? But it's still like the option is to go into the military. So what is that about? Very interesting. So y'all, I was all set to like hang out and chill and kick back with all of you all forever, but y'all know I don't like to just look at the screen and just run my mouth. And probably the longest that I expect anyone to sit here and listen to me talk is about an hour. So we're gonna bring it to a close today. I want to remind everyone though that there won't be a live stream next week, which means that I'm going to try my best to get some videos up during the week so that, you know, I get to hear from you. You have something to post on. Ananda, thank you so much. That's very, very kind of you to say. And I certainly like to share these thoughts because otherwise they would just be spinning around in my head. Why won't anyone guess? Come on, y'all. It's because the time that I choose, most of y'all are just getting up. I know most of y'all are just getting up. I know people have their hair curlers in. People still got their mask on, right? People haven't like, you know, prepped and done their toilettes and all those things. I know it's too early in the morning, y'all, and that's why one of the reasons I'm considering changing the time of this broadcast. But that's going to be a long, long drawn out process. And chances are things are going to continue to be spotty. When I'm in Detroit, it's a lot easier to keep a schedule of posting, right? And so, which is why it was like great to do. When I'm in Detroit, it's just much easier to maintain a schedule of posting. But when I'm in Brooklyn, it's not as easy, especially when I'm, you know, doing a show. Yeah, bathrobes and stuff. And I, you know, please, I'm not gonna. I don't love you all any less for not. Do I press go live to guest? No, I mean, Tom, I can just do like this. I can invite you like that, and then you can just decide if you want to accept or not. But it's not, you know, and don't feel bad if you leave me hanging or anything like that. But and all that said, like I said, I appreciate you all for being here, and I appreciate like what rolls by in the chat. But I know that you all can't type fast enough to say everything that you want to say. I know that. So I know that I'm only getting like the very like I'm getting the like okay, okay, all right. Um, oh wait, stop. I just did a strange thing. Um, Okay, so Tom, so next time. So again, remember everyone, next week, and I will post, you know, I'll do like one of those like on the spot videos, and you guys have to let me know what you think about those little on the spot videos when I'm like, oh yeah, hey everybody, like I did one outside of the church, and I do want to talk more about the church, by the way, so I'll make some videos about that, and then I think in a live stream, maybe when I'm talking about the Michigan, when I come back, we'll do a little bit of a talk about, you know, energy and clean and renewable energy, and how it continues to be a challenge, not because it's not possible, but because there are forces blocking the proliferation of clean and renewable energy. So we'll talk about that. Cool, cool. So you'll definitely be getting, if nothing else, next Sunday, I'll post some videos, and I'll probably bring my camera to the auditions and record some of that. So Ananda says, I hate clickbait. I don't know that, I hope it wasn't really clickbait. I mean, because we did talk about schools. Um, Lai Chin says the oil companies own a lot of patents. I don't know, but like, that's the weird thing, because this is one of the things about like genetically modified foods, right? Is like suddenly now food is something that you can patent. You can have a patent on food, and soon you'll have they'll have a patent on air. I mean, who knows, or a patent on water, and I'm afraid of what that world will be like. Again, I don't want to come off as like the conspiracy person. I just am looking around and I'm asking some questions about some stuff that doesn't seem to add up to me. And I don't know why, and I don't want to give the ultimate reason for it, but you know, clearly there are people who are benefiting from things being the way they are right now. What we see as broken is somebody else's working exactly like it's supposed to. And on that note, let's bring this live stream to an end. That's it for this video. And for those of you watching on YouTube, like this video if you like it, share it, comment, subscribe. This is Reg signing off. Love yourselves. Peace.